Unless he blades a chip, in which case it's over. Yep. Yeah, we're ready.
What is going on, guys? Hope you all had a good weekend. If you're celebrating the holidays, hope you enjoyed that. But now it's time to get back to the grind. Monday, MLB Strategy Show, sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm here joined with Eric. Now, Eric played some golf this weekend. I actually socialized a little bit, hung out with friends. The Celtics won, which was big for me. I was really excited about that. Eric, what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's amazing what gambling and everything else will do. I only thought of you when that bucket went in because I know how much you have on the Celtics. I know how much you have on the line there. I was just an interested observer. It happened. I was watching the end of the game on my iPad as we were going into the afternoon show with EMAC, and I could not believe some of the defensive deficiencies of the Brooklyn Nets kind of came back to bite them there. It's a spot where I think it's going to be a 7-game series, but always nice to be on the right side of the first one. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And it's funny. There was a point yesterday where I considered betting unders on Kyrie just because of the Ramadan narrative, because I'm thinking like, how plausible is it to play through a playoff NBA game where you play extended minutes with no food or water in you at all? And the fact that he's gonna have to play extended minutes without ever hydrating. I was like, that just seems from, like a health standpoint, like it could be difficult. No. Enlightened Ramadan.
He did that in the
Kyrie.
play-in game though, too, He did that in the play-in game was during Ramadan.
But that was a night game.
Yeah, but it was a spot where he didn't eat or drink anything all day. That's what he had said afterwards.
But the difference is that he was allowed to drink water during the game. And he was eating fruit during the game because it was at night. Okay. So he was allowed to eat this during the game. He's not allowed to. He hasn't eaten, and he isn't allowed to drink at all during the game.
Gotcha.
So that was something I thought could possibly be problematic. Ended up not being, unless he just totally gassed on the final play of the game where him and Durant totally slept walk on Jason Tatum walking behind them for a layup for the game.
How do you not know where Jason Tatum is on the last play of a game? Is all I'm getting down to.
Everybody on the court, including Jason Tatum, who said in a post-game interview, he thought that Marcus Smart was going to shoot. And apparently everybody on the Nets did too, because 2 guys closed out on him and jumped. It was Claxton and somebody else. I forget who it was. But yeah, and then Tatum just snuck behind everybody, got the layup, and 1-0 Celtics. And it was fun also because all my friends that were over yesterday and my brother was there also, we all have futures bets on the Celtics. So it was a fun way to watch the game. But anyway, now we've got baseball to talk about and our sponsor, PrizePicks. If you guys have not signed up at PrizePicks for the first time, you could do so using the promo code Awesemo. That'll get you up to $100 bonus on your first deposit and 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Now let's start talking about this slate, and conveniently this game is first because there also was a weather aspect. At least as of now, it looks like the game is fairly unlikely to play the Arizona Diamondbacks at the Washington Nationals. The game has a percentage chance of rain of over 80%. So if I was building lineups right now, I would be taking it out of my player pool. But with that said, it's so early in the day, the weather could change. So I think it's still worth discussing, at least as things stand now. Check out the MLB Live Before Lock later and all other content, because there's a good chance that game will either be canceled by then or there'll be other news. But if things go on as planned, Arizona Diamondbacks, Washington Nationals, Madison Bumgarner on the mound for Arizona, Josiah Gray on the mound for Washington. Just first, like, how do you approach the weather in spots like this? Because we haven't done a show yet together where there's been a game that's been this iffy looking.
Yeah, I think what happens is I end up full stacking because whatever, if it doesn't end up playing, I want to at least have the opportunity to extract some massive value. And I know some people do, maybe one-offs works out optimally. Well, okay, there's also going to be a lot of bats over replacement in the course of a multiple game slate where I can get to other spots in that position and not be completely drawing dead. So I tend to be the guy who full stacks up games with weather concerns like this. I will just have all 5 bats from one side of it, feel pretty confident that, if it doesn't go off, I just pretend that team scored 0 runs, and such is life. Like, you want to be able to get exposure, especially when it's Madison Bumgarner and Josiah Gray on the mound, guys who walk a lot of dudes. Madison Bumgarner through 2 starts now, 16.2% walk rate to go with a 10.8% K percentage. I mean, we've seen some massive regression from him in 2020, 2021. It's only gotten worse for him. I find Madison Bumgarner somebody to get to stack up against pretty much every time. And then you've got on the other side, Josiah Gray. It's like, well, yeah, he can miss bats once in a while. 26.3% K percentage in the early going of this season. But on the whole, he's going to be another guy who just walks a lot of dudes. So I find it hard not to want to full stack both of these guys if this game looks a little bit better come, 3:00 my time.
Yeah, so here's the good news, at least for me, from a strategy standpoint. We have both of these teams as two of the more over-owned stacks on the entire slate. We have Washington with a negative 2% leverage score. We've got Arizona also with a negative 2% leverage score. Just two teams that are projected for 6% ownership around there, but also with much lower odds of being the top stack on the slate. So when I personally consider the weather risk and the fact that these teams show up as over-owned in our tools, I'm cool with just avoiding them and being like, hey, if the game plays, cool. They look like they're over-owned anyway. If the game doesn't play, even better, because all those guys would score 0 fantasy points. I don't have interest in the pitchers in this spot. So I think this game is just going to be a write-off for me, although it looks like there's a pretty good chance that it's going to get canceled ahead of time. But does that make sense to you as well?
Totally. I mean, you can look at it as chopping into your rake, like a little bit of a time. If you can be on the right side of these type of things, you're in really good shape. But I also want to embrace it, especially if it's a game that I thought was going to late start because of some kind of weather issues. I'm just inclined to full stack it, put 4 or 5% in. That's going to put you over the field in a lot of these weather spots too. So two different ways to go about skinning the same cat.
Yeah. And also we'll see what the ownership looks like. Cause my standpoint also is just that these teams look over-owned right now in our tools. But like you said, people could just get totally off them because of the weather risk later in the day, which could change the outcome. We do have a super chat here from You Don't Know JD saying, good morning, boys. He is on a mini heater, set a serviceable dummy lineup using Pro Plays PGA. Forgot to change it Wednesday night, but turned $60 into $2,200. Keep it rolling. You know what's funny? I did something. I didn't make $2,200 this weekend for PGA, but I did about 5x my entry fees. Same thing. I set my lineups on like Tuesday using our projections, making dummy lineups, and totally forgot I had entered lineups. And then all of a sudden I'm looking, then I'm like, oh, I've got a bunch of Cantley, I've got a bunch of Cameron Young, and just my lineups were crushing. So you don't know JD. It's the way to go. You forget to say your lineups around here. It goes well more often than not. I know Eric's been on the right side of that. Adam's been on the right side of that. Everybody benefits from fucking up every once in a while. It is one of the better ways to play DFS. It's fair to assume the pitchers in this game, when it comes to Josiah Gray, Madison Bumgarner, not guys that you're enthralled with rostering?
No, I went through their metrics. I hate them. Yeah. They're bad.
All right, fair enough.
Josiah Gray can miss bats, but once in a while. So I don't completely hate the idea of having a couple in 150, but I hate the idea of having any Madison Bumgarner.
Yeah, I am on the same page as you. I can't remember the last time I've rostered Madison Bumgarner with any kind of regularity. Probably when he was back on the Giants and
World Series showdown.
Yeah, not even recently on the Giants, like a few years, like pre-bike accident, Madison Bumgarner. But that aside, we can now talk about Madison Bumgarner's old team, the San Francisco Giants, on the road against the New York Mets. Listen to this, Eric. This game opened up with a total of 6.5. That is crazy low because we got Tyler McGill, who is not allowed a single run yet this year. His numbers were good in his rookie year. If anybody's looking at the numbers on screen, I'm still using the numbers from last year just because it's bigger sample size. But Tyler McGill has looked ridiculously good this year. So is Alex Cobb. But first, I just want to know, what do you make of this game having a 6.5 run total?
I mean, is Jacob deGrom at the height of his powers last year? That was the last time we saw, I think there was a 6. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure I saw a 6 last year. Somebody will find out. We've got
there was a 5.5. Max Scherzer.
There was a 5.5. That's what it was. I know that there was one where I looked at the board and was flabbergasted, and I think I bet the under, but I can't remember. I think I did. But either way, I'm looking at this game, and these are just two exceptional pitchers. Tyler McGill, I mean, he's just a big dude out on the mound. Doesn't really do a whole, I look at his numbers. 96 tops out on the fastball, 26.1% K percentage last season, 3.87 expected ERA, so even better than his actual ERA. If we're expecting positive regression, and now we're definitely seeing that here, 2.59 expected ERA in the early going, as you said, 0 ERA, yet to give up a run. He just sticks out as a guy that's just a really good real-life pitcher. You've got a decent enough bullpen behind both these teams. It makes a lot of sense that you're going to have this low of a total here. I don't really see a single thing that I want to get to offensively here. Do you?
No, I mean, in a game that has a 6.5 total, that's going to be hard for me to get behind right now. I mean, if you look at, we have the Mets with a 2.2% chance to be the top stock on the slate, the Giants 2.4% chance. So, I mean, just from that standpoint, they are under owned because they only have 1% projected ownership, but that's still not something that's going to be really appealing to me. It's a 6.5 total. What is the actual odds of one of these teams being a high scoring team on the slate? It's fairly low. So it's not going to be one that I'm all that interested in. The pitchers, though, are also kind of oddly not that popular. Starting with the DraftKings ownership, Tyler McGill is projected for 8% ownership, and then we've got Alex Cobb also projected for 8%. So that to me makes both these pitchers look like guys I want to get to, because not only do we have this really low run total in the game, but people aren't rostering these pitchers either. McGill over on FanDuel is projected for 5% ownership. Alex Cobb is projected for 2%. I don't like these offenses, but it's hard for me to not like these pitchers considering all this information. I know that McGill on both sites is a little bit expensive, but is that problematic for you at all?
No, I think we're looking at some weather that exists here as well. And pitch count, 68 and 76 pitches for Tyler McGill in the early going. I don't know what that upside is for 9,300. You're basically, if you're rostering him, you kind of know you're getting topped out at 80. Like, it's hard to really see him go beyond 80. We saw 83 out of Alex Cobb. I think I'm more inclined at 7,500 to play a lot more shares of him, but 9,300, you talk about the opportunity cost of Kershaw, or, getting to Sean Manaea for sure at 9,100 for 200 less. I find it hard to prioritize McGill whatsoever over those two, but he's a phenomenal pitcher. It just comes down to, I think, a pitch count thing for me.
Yeah, and in terms of the pitch count, now that we're 3 starts into the season, not to say that everybody's unrestricted at this point, because like you said, McGill hasn't worked super deep into games at this point from a pitch count perspective. You just brought it up there, 68 and 76 pitches. He has still managed to average 25 fantasy points in those starts. Yep. But I do think after he got, 10 extra pitches last start, I think we're probably in like the 85 to 90 range with him, which is close to a full workload. So it's not massively concerned to me. As long as he stays with single digit ownership, it's a spot I want to get to.
Absolutely. And I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, because he's got a 16.9% top 2 pitcher percentage and ownership sub 9%. Anytime you see a situation like that, there's a lot of paths for him to be successful here. It's going to be a spot that I want to get to more than that. Just wanted to kind of say that the reason that he's not more popular is just, you don't see somebody get over 80 pitches. It's going to be hard to really want to overinvest in them.
Yeah. And I mean, we do have one pitcher, Frankie Montas, we're going to talk about later, who's just so underpriced on DraftKings that he's soaking up a ridiculous amount of ownership. And even on FanDuel at 9,900, Montas is the most popular pitcher on the slate, at least 7,300 on DK. So the field is going to get there in droves. Offenses, it's just not offenses I can get behind, like I said before, with those low top stack odds. So to me, it's kind of pitchers are bust in this spot, and I'm going to be overweight to both these pitchers because they're projected for such low ownership. But it doesn't mean these are guys I'm getting into like 30% of my lineups or anything like that. Moving on to the next game, Tampa Bay Rays on the road against the Chicago Cubs. Shane McClanahan, who is a very high strikeout pitcher, but could also be a little bit erratic. He is on one side of the game in a positive matchup against the Cubs. And then we've got Kyle Hendricks against the Rays. Now, Kyle Hendricks last year was no good at all. Not only was his normal low strikeout rate there, but also he was getting hit much harder than he was in the past. His walk rate was higher. So we had a 4.95 expected ERA. When you pair that with his inability to strike guys out, this was just not a good fantasy pitcher last year. But I want to start by asking you about Shane McClanahan, because we have a bunch of high upside pitchers on this slate. But where does McClanahan get into the mix for you? He's $8,100 on DK. On FanDuel, he's $9,200. Good matchup against the Cubs and really high strikeout upside, 27% K rate last season.
Yeah, really good strikeout matchup. Also an opportunity where Shane McClanahan, he's kind of like falling into that McGill bucket where we can expect that pinch count to only go up from here. So, you're kind of buying in the floor. You go into 68 and then 85. 85 is a really nice number to be getting out of Shane McClanahan, looking at some of his underlying metrics from last year. 27.3% K percentage. That's up to 39.5 through 2 starts this season. I don't see that maintaining, but he had an xERA of 4.6, but a 3.43 ERA. So negative regression that we're kind of seeing in that standpoint. he's a really good pitcher. I'm not trying to say anything about that, but once in a while gives up quite a bit of hard contact, 45.7%. I think just kind of looking at the Cubs, there's new power that exists in this lineup. Well, I mean, they lost Rizzo, they lost Bryant, but you get Suzuki, you get some guys who definitely have some pop in this lineup. I think this might be a spot to go to a little bit of both sides for it. Kind of the first both sides of it game for me. Chicago Cubs are going to go very, very low owned, but there's enough power here where McClanahan, yeah, he'll miss bats, but he'll also give up that hard contact. So I'm okay getting to both sides of it.
And then the other side of this game, a spot I'm not going to be looking to get to both sides of because Kyle Hendricks, no good in real life at this point in his career, no good for fantasy either. So mentioned last year, really struggled, had a 4.77 ERA, 4.95 expected ERA. There's a couple of things that are concerning about his starts of the season. And it's only 9 innings, so it's not a big sample size, but a 7 ERA, a 6.32 expected ERA, average fastball velocity, 86.9 miles per hour. So we now have a guy in Kyle Hendricks who's never been a hard thrower, is now 32 years old, and has seen even another downtick in his velocity. As a result, maybe you could say that's why his walk rate has gone up, because last year it was at 5.6%, where he's been somebody who's been a lot lower. 2020, for instance, he had a 2.5% walk rate. Then it goes up to 5.6 last year. This year, 9 innings, 15.6%. Maybe he just recognizes he doesn't have the same stuff right now, so he's really nibbling and trying to touch on the corners. Either way, Kyle Hendricks, I think there's a good chance this is a pitcher who's just totally washed. And then he's going up against an offense on the other side of the game that just isn't picking up all that much ownership right now. So we have the Tampa Bay Rays project for 6% ownership with a 7.5% chance to be the top stack of the slate over on DraftKings. That is really appealing to me, especially because I'm just kind of lower on Kyle Hendricks than the majority of the public is. Over on FanDuel, similar numbers, 6.5% ownership, 7.5% top stack odds. This is going to be one of my most rostered stacks on the slate. Are you on the same page as me?
Yeah, I probably am. I mean, Kyle Hendricks has never been like a fastball guy. Looking through his pitch numbers by season, I mean, he's primarily fastball, throwing it less than 22% of the time, a little bit of an outlier in that regard compared to most major league starters. We're looking at a sinker ball, primarily pitcher. He's throwing his changeup a lot more this year, probably because it's hard for him to always locate and know exactly what's going on with the sinker. Plus, he's getting no swings and misses on it. Only a 12.5% whiff percentage on the sinker here in the early going. Generally, in the same way a fastball isn't going to get a lot of whiffs, your primary pitch isn't going to get all the whiffs. You're setting it up for the changeup or for whatever kind of curveball he has, which is pretty much nothing. Throwing that less than 16% of the time. He's not a good pitcher. I'm with you. I think that this needs to be an offense that we have a lot of consideration for on the other side of it. At this point in time, all of the things that used to work for Kyle Hendricks, deception, kind of, as you said, touching on the corners, that's kind of been something that he's had to rely on. Problematic now. Tampa Bay offense. I already know all the lefties. Brandon Lau, I talk about him every slate. Absolutely love that man. Wander Franco. We're looking at Rosarena. Josh Lau is kind of nice addition to this lineup in terms of a bat. I expect more long-term than 138, no homers and an RBI. I think he'll be a lot better off than that. I think Tampa Bay expects that too. He's been batting middle of the order here for them. So a lot of bats that I want to get to on this side.
Yeah, so in the crunch I ran this morning, the 3 hitters I got to the most in my Tampa Bay stacks, Josh Lowe, Wander Franco, and Brandon Lau. So yeah, all guys you mentioned right there that made it into my lineups. Then one more thing that I'm going to say to just besmirch the good name of Kyle Hendricks, his ground ball rate the last 3 years, 2020, 47.1%, 2021, 43.1%. And this year so far, once again, small sample size, but 38.5%. All not great trends for a pitcher who's now allowing more balls to be hit in the air against him. At one point, he got by with limited stuff. It just looks like it's deteriorated to a point where it's going to be difficult for him. So I don't like Kyle Hendricks as a real-life pitcher, and I'm going to like stacking the Rays up against him for this slate. Next game we have to hit on, the Pittsburgh Pirates against the Milwaukee Brewers. We've got 2 not highest of name pitchers, Zach Thompson on the mound for Pittsburgh, Eric Lauer for Milwaukee. So now Lauer is never really been the highest upside fantasy pitcher, not because he isn't good, but because the Brewers have kind of generally limited how deep he goes into games. But how do you view him on this slate when he goes up against a pretty crappy Pirates offense?
Yeah, and we're seeing more strikeout stuff from Eric Lauer in the early going, 26.3% K percentage. That would be a sizable increase from 23.9%. But even that last season was surprising to me, considering for his career was around a 21% K percentage guy. Found a little something, found a little bit of strikeout ability there last season and kind of carried over into this season through a start. So I think Eric Lauer, I don't completely hate getting to him on this slate. Not something I expected to say, but anytime you see an offense or see a pitcher with decent enough strikeout stuff, which is now, I guess, the way that I have to look at Eric Lauer. He's 26. There's definitely opportunities for him to improve, and he's shown drastic improvement in this strikeout potential last season. I think he's a guy I might roster a little bit more than I was expecting because Pittsburgh confirmed not a good offense.
No, and especially not yesterday when they sat a lot of the regular starters, and then it was an even worse offense than normal. I had what was very disappointing. So I actually had a bunch of bets on Patrick Corbin for over 4.5 strikeouts, and he had 3 through 3 innings. He'd only thrown 30 pitches at that time. Like, he's cruising. He's going to hit this easily. And then he kept getting in these 2-strike counts and generating pop-ups. So he ended up leaving the game, only struck out 4 hitters. Very disappointing for me. But either way, this Pirates offense, no good. It's one that I like to pick on. And here's something else I'm going to point out about Eric Lauer. His first start of the season, velocity was way up. And this has been a trend over the last couple of years. 2020, his average fastball, and I guess we should go back because he didn't throw that much in 2020. So look at 2019. Where he threw 149 innings. He had a 91.9 average fastball velocity. Then last season, it was 92.5. Now this year, it's only one start. It's only a few innings, but 94.4. This is a guy who's trending upwards in terms of velocity. That's a positive sign. And then also, like you said, the strikeout rate was a little bit higher last year. We'll see where that ends up being this year. It just kind of remain unseen how deep we expect him to go into the game. But 4 1/3 inning is first time out. What do you think is a reasonable pitch count expectation here for Lauer?
I mean, for the most 8,900, 95 would be on the table. I mean, 89 pitches out of the gate is beautiful stuff. And again, I'm more inclined. That's kind of the McGill conundrum is, San Francisco is going to be a team that, as good as they were last year, we both expect regression for them. And in the early going, they strike out at a 25.7% rate. I think we're going to see something close to that. And I like McGill, but Eric Lauer, it's really hard not to click on that name against Pittsburgh at home with an opportunity to get this AAA lineup facing them. It's hard for me not to want to side a little bit more with Eric Lauer, all other things being considered. He is getting, double the ownership or almost 2.5x the ownership of McGill, but I feel like I could probably use that $400, put it to work somewhere else and maybe end up on a little bit more Lauer.
$7,100 over on FanDuel. That's going to be a price point that's really hard to ignore. Good. And then also when I bring up the pitch count, something else I'll mention, like you said, 89 pitches, first start good. The Brewers have been much less restrictive with pitch counts for their starting pitchers than other teams. We saw Corbin Burns against the Orioles the other day. He was at like 92 pitches heading into the 7th inning, and they just put him out there to pitch another inning. So this is a team that's been way more liberal with allowing their pitchers to go deeper into games than other teams, which I think is a positive for Eric Lauer, even if he traditionally hasn't always worked deeper into games. It seems like this year is going to be a little bit different. Now, on the other side of the game, Zach Thompson is going to be pitching for the Pittsburgh Pirates. His numbers last year, probably a little bit better than a lot of people would have expected. 21% K rate, 3.68 expected ERA, 1.21 FIP. So I look at this as probably not as great of a matchup for the Brewers as a lot of people would expect. And then something else to consider, this is one of the most over-owned offenses in our top stacks tool today. 11% projected ownership, 7% chance to be a top stack over on FanDuel. So that to me makes them a team that I'm not really dying to target. And then looking at the numbers for them over on DraftKings, we have the Milwaukee Brewers also projected for about 7% ownership. So that's a little more reasonable on DK than it is on FanDuel. But what do you make of the matchup against Zach Thompson, who really wasn't terrible last season?
Yeah, it wasn't terrible. 21% K percentage, not really missing any bats, but a 3.65 expected ERA. What really stands out to me, just a 365 expected slugging going up against him and just short of 1,200 pitches. It's pretty noticeable to me. 227 expected batting average. I think other than the hard contact he can give up from time to time, I don't mind him as a major league pitcher here just because he's able to do some really good stuff. Now, a fantasy pitcher, that's a different question. I don't really think I want to get to a lot of him here. He's going to be sitting right around about a 21% K percentage going forward here. Milwaukee, I don't really have a lot of interest going to them. I feel like they've been one of the more over-owned offenses in the early going of the season on just about every slate. Not a whole lot intriguing to me from this spot. I think this entire game is going to be Eric Lauer or bust.
Yeah, and like I said, DraftKings, I think it's okay to get some of the Brewer stocks that look about appropriate, but they are pretty overowned right now on FanDuel, where they're going to be one of the more popular offenses on the slate. So that's where I'm standing with this game. Do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, helps us out a whole bunch, boosts Eric's ego, lets him buy some new shirts because we pay him based on the amount of likes that is. Because Eric, usually we like to, Usually Eric asks me to show my shirt, but I think Eric has a pretty cool shirt today. And since we are directly paid based on the amount of likes and subscriptions the YouTube channel has, don't fact check me on that. Like the video so that Eric could buy more cool t-shirts. Next game, have I been excited to talk about this one? Los Angeles Angels, Houston Astros. Eric, why do you think I'm excited to talk about this game?
I don't know. I'm telling T McBee that I think that sounds like a Yankees problem, that the Pirates have more runs than them and 40 fewer plate appearances. Maybe figure your shit out, Yankees. How about that?
It is definitely a Yankees problem. Also, when it comes to the Angels, generational talent, Michael Lorenzen on the mound today. His numbers as a pitcher, not quite as good as his. I hate
you. I really hate.
I mean, we can't doubt his prowess with a bat in his hand. The pitching numbers last year, though, left a little bit to be wanting because he only had a 16.8% K rate. His expected ERA wasn't bad at 4.01, but in general, this is just going to be a guy that there aren't that many spots we want to roster him, particularly not on the road in Houston. But I know, Eric, you love yourself Michael Lorenzen, the best hitting pitcher in baseball history. How do you feel about him as a pitcher, though, in the spot against Houston?
I have no words for you. 7K outfielder, Michael Lorenzen, now 7,100 pitching up here in this spot. I don't really know what to say. It's not a team, traditionally, the Astros going back the last few years, not a team that you're going out of your way to target in terms of K percentage. That's showing that it's going to be the same this season, 19% K percentage now in the early going. I expect them to be one of the teams that strike out the least in all of Major League Baseball. So Michael Lorenzen, really nice little story for him going out there, putting up 28.3 against the Marlins. This ain't the Marlins. So I'm probably not looking at getting to a whole heck of a lot here.
I'm confused by the Houston ownership on DraftKings because the spot against Lorenzen, it's not like he sucked last year, but he wasn't really great as a pitcher either, nor has he ever been at any point in his career, at least as a starter. And the Houston Astros are projected for almost no ownership on DK, 2.9% expected ownership. This is by far the most positive leverage stack on the slate. If that does not change, Houston is going to be my most rostered offense tonight because this is a team that they have as good of an offense as anybody short of the Dodgers in baseball. And the field is just not rostering them in a decent matchup. So I love stacking Houston. Do you feel the same way?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I didn't feel good about it because I feel like they've been one of my most rostered stacks in the early going of the season. Hasn't really gone well, but I don't care because Kyle Tucker exists, and Kyle Tucker is going to be my highest owned one-off almost every single day. He's always batting middle of the order, like fifth, sixth, but crazy amounts of power going back to last season. He's always under-owned as a result of his lineup spot, and I really don't care. Set the table for him, Bregman, Altuve, Brantley, Gurriel, everybody get on base. Let Kyle Tucker do the hard work there. I feel great about him as a bat going forward here. One of my favorite players in all of baseball. Really glad he started turning it on at the major league level last season, and it's only going to go up and up for him. So I'm going to be long-term invested in Kyle Tucker pretty much every day. And I don't mind outside of Martin Maldonado, who I almost never roster in these stacks. It's basically a 1 through 8 for me. Jeremy Pena, Chas McCormick, I think they're all right to include in your stacks here as well. Brantley, it's strange because I feel like out of every batter on Houston, he's the guy that I always end up with the least amount of. If you're playing cash, he's like a guy who will get you 8, 10 pretty routinely, but doesn't hit as many home runs as you would want out of the 2-hole here for Houston. So a guy that I always end up a little bit lower on in the stacks, but I think he's all right to include here today. 4K. I'll get to probably quite a bit of him now in this spot. I'm with you. Maybe people see Michael Lorenzen, they see his one outing against Miami, and they shy away. But you and I will not be. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then one other thing that should be a positive to the Astros offense, we don't know this for sure, but we do have Yordan Alvarez is expected to be activated from the COVID list today. Do you know how many times he's been on the COVID list now in the last year?
I'm guessing 4.
It has been 4. I know because my brother, who owns a lot of Yordan Alvarez baseball cards, freaks out whenever anything happens with Yordan Alvarez. So he's always, how did this guy get COVID 4 times? So my brother's always freaking out about Yordan Alvarez, but he is expected to be activated today. If that is the case, that's another power left-handed bat added to the middle of the Astros lineup, would certainly bolster their upside. On the other side of the game, Luis Garcia is going to be on the mound for Houston against the Angels. And the Angels are not an easy matchup, but you're not going to believe it. Mike Trout's injured. It happened again. Mike Trout got hurt yesterday. I'm not sure if he's going to be in the lineup or not. If he is not going to play today, I believe that I saw the x-rays were negative on his hand. But with that said, the expectation is that Mike Trout is going to miss at least one game, if not more, for the Angels. So this is a little bit of an easier matchup than it would typically be for Luis Garcia against the Angels. And another pitcher who's just not going to be all that popular today on DraftKings. Got Luis Garcia, high price tag at 9,600, but only projected for 8% ownership with a 15% chance to be a top pitcher. And then over on FanDuel, I also think he offers good value, a spot where I expect the Astros should be able to win. They are favored in this spot. He's only $6,700 on FanDuel. I like Luis Garcia on both sites for different reasons. FanDuel because he's underpriced, on DraftKings because he's underowned. Are you going to like to get to Luis Garcia under the assumption that Mike Trout does not play today?
Yeah, under the assumption that he's going to be out there. I mean, 26.4% K percentage in 2021. We saw some stark improvement from 2020. So, or drastic improvement is the right word. Only 6.3%, 1 outing. Who cares? I'm looking at 2021 numbers going forward here. 3.92 expected ERA. Primarily fastball guy, fly ball pitcher. It's kind of a spot where I find it hard to believe that I'm not going to be getting to quite a bit of him without Mike Trout. I mean, him and Byron Buxton, please stay healthy. What are you guys doing here? I don't understand it. I just don't.
Well, at least, both of them seems like they avoided injury scares. Buxton looks like he's only going to miss, a week or two. Where Trout also day to day, but it does also feel like only a matter of time before one of these guys comes out with a more significant injury. It's crazy. Trout's been the best player in baseball for such a long time and just hasn't gotten to play in the playoffs because he had bad teams around him. And he hasn't been able to stay on the field as of late. So it's definitely limited his upside a little bit as a year-long fantasy play. Are you going to look to stack against Luis Garcia at all? One thing that is positive for the Angels, Shohei Ohtani, after really struggling to hit the ball in the first handful of games this season, the bat has come back alive. I mean, it's fun to kind of troll people, make fun of it. But Shohei Ohtani, there was never going to be a time where he actually sucked as a hitter. But now that he's kind of gotten it going again, how are you going to look at him as a one-off and then potentially also the Angels as a stack as a whole?
Yeah, you talked to me. You're like, do you have any concerns for Ohtani? Yeah. I think was the first question you asked me. I said, no, you have no concerns for Ohtani. It's like 1 week. If you look at a 1 week sample size of the best hitters in baseball, I guarantee you can find stretches of atrocity. Like you're going to find stretches where they struggle. It's too small of a sample size. Ohtani's 5,700. His number hasn't changed constantly here. It's been basically 5,700. He was 6K for the opening series against Houston. It's gone down to 5,700. It shouldn't be. And against any pitcher on planet Earth, he makes sense as a one-off. Now, this stack is a different kind of conversation because there are not a lot of great hitters. I think Jared Walsh would probably be my second favorite guy to get to. Rendon, it's sad kind of what's happened to him after Washington. And, he's got 1 homer now on the season so far. I mean, obviously it's pretty short sample size, but still just doesn't look to be the hitter that he once was. I'm looking at Jared Walsh as pretty much the only other guy I want to get to much of. Joe Adell, I kind of do a special shout out to all the time just because of the power numbers from FanGraphs. I thought he'd be a guy from AAA who could translate a little bit more. Last year really struggled, but I think that they believe in him. That's why he's batting up higher in that order. I'm okay getting to a little bit of Joe Adell in my stacks, but this is not a team that I'm going to go out of my way to get to much of.
Yeah, there's also, I'm not really looking to go out of my way to roster Joe Adell or Brandon Marsh either, but these are guys that have massive upside and have potential to make this Angels lineup really dangerous because also it's going to depend on health with Ohtani and Trout and Rendon. The odds of Trout and Rendon staying healthy the entire year seems slim at best. But Joe Adell, formerly one of the better hitting prospects in baseball, look at his last full year in the minor leagues, 2019, 173 WRC plus, down in Double-A. And same thing with Brandon Marsh. These were at one point really highly regarded hitting prospects. If they break out this year, in addition to the firepower they already have in the top of that lineup, look out. but it's a low probability outcome. A lot has to break right for the Angels. At least for today, my preference is going to be to roster Luis Garcia of the pitcher versus offense here.
Joe Adele, 70-70 raw power on Fangraphs. Like, we're talking about a guy that has some massive ability. He was the number 1 ranked prospect out of the Angels organization, overall top 10. And there's been some real studs coming up through the ranks in recent years. So he's a guy that I've just had my eye on for a while. I have in a year-long league stashed away. Last year, he just completely destroyed some spots. I just kind of was a little bit too bullish batting behind Ohtani and such. I mean, he was back of the order for most of the time, but Joe Adele, please pan into something because I could use it.
All right, let's move on to the Coors Field game. But first, if you guys want access to all of the tools we have over at Awesemo for nearly every single DFS sport out there, you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. But if you're only looking to play baseball DFS, we do have MLB packages for as low as $4.95 weekly. Good way to get in the door and get access to all the tools that Eric and I use to build our lineups, like the top pitchers tool, top stacks tool, ownership projections, all stuff that is invaluable for MLB DFS. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Let's go to Coors Field, and let's start by talking about this Philadelphia Phillies offense. We're going up against Chad Kuhl, and I don't really understand why the Rockies brought in Chad Kuhl. I do not think he's going to be a good fit for Coors because as hard as he throws, he does not have good strikeout he does not have good strikeout numbers. He generates a lot of contact, a lot of hard contact. I think this is going to be a disaster for him in Coors this year, but the Philadelphia Phillies are projected to be the most popular offense on this slate by a pretty wide margin. 29% ownership over on FanDuel as a team, 23% on DraftKings. How are you going to be weighing the upside of the Phillies offense in Coors Field against a bad pitcher with all this ownership?
The nice thing is that there's positive leverage going to Philadelphia, even slightly. It seems like maybe going a little bit under-owned as a stack, just slightly. And that makes it very, very intriguing. It's hard to find positive leverage in Coors, and I feel like we got it a couple of times with Colorado. We'll see what happens as the day progresses here with this lineup, but we kind of know which isolated bats are going to stand out from this Phillies lineup. It's going to be Harper, Real Muto, Kyle Schwarber, I guess Camargo as well. Johan Camargo, he's switch hitter, should be in that lineup today as well. Lots of opportunity, I think, for them to go completely nuts against Chad Kuhl, 29-year-old, who gives up hard contact. You talked about that, 50% now in his first start. Now 37.2% over the course of last season. Only a 4.79 expected ERA. That was a much better mark than what we saw in 2018 and 2020 out of him. 2019, him not playing. 6.04 expected ERA, 6.69 in 2020. These are drastically bad numbers. And so Chad Kuhl, maybe there's something that he found there, but he doesn't miss bats. 21.1% walk rate. He was walking guys like crazy last start out, 12% and 14.2% the last 2 seasons. So he walks guys. He doesn't miss a whole heck of a lot of bats. And you're looking at an absolute can't miss spot. I mean, the Phillies are the best offense on the board to target. It's just a question of how popular they'll be.
Yeah, and then also there is a difference between DraftKings and FanDuel. Like you said, the DK ownership, it looks about appropriate, which for me makes it a team that just has to be a high priority in this spot. But what do you make of them on FanDuel, where they're projected for nearly 30% ownership? This looks like, for a full slate anyway, small slate's totally different story, but for a full MLB slate, this is the most popular offense, I believe, off the top of my head, we've seen this year. So how are you going to balance it on FanDuel where they're nearly 30% owned?
I'm not going to probably play a lot of them over there is kind of what it comes down to. We've talked about enough spots that I feel pretty confident in. I think on the other side of this game, Aaron Nola's shown some blemishes early on. And I think Colorado is probably the most intriguing offense to get to over on FanDuel for today. But Philadelphia, yeah, they're going a little bit over-owned. I find it hard to be able to just full fade in this spot against Chad Kuhl. Even if I'm playing over on FanDuel, it's too high of an offense or too high of a opportunity. 22.8% top stack percentage. I think I would want to still find some ways to maybe get unique with my stacks. I would find a couple of hitters that maybe would be less popular in that lineup. Try to prioritize some of them. You get the back end of the order guys, whether it's I already talked about Camargo. I talked about Gene Segura is somebody you could probably play a little bit more of. Veerling, if he ends up in that lineup. A lot of spots where Didi Gregorius could be in that lineup as well. I would expect him to be. Lots of guys on the back end of this order that I think have some viability. Maybe prioritizing more of them rather than just stacking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where everybody wants to get there.
Yeah, that's something I love to do with really popular stacks, is trying to find some of the lesser owned hitters towards the bottom of the lineup. Now, it's not like we're going to find a name in this Philly lineup that's 1 or 2% owned, but there is a difference between going to, like a Didi Gregorius at 10% ownership and, a Bryce Harper at over 30%. So there are ways to find slightly lesser owned guys, or just pairing them with, a lesser owned pitcher on the slate, because there are some contrarian options that we pointed out. Now, the other side of this game is also really interesting to me, because Aaron Nola should be one of the better pitchers in baseball. Now, his earned run average, both to start this year and last year, looks like has been a lot of bad luck, because last year he had a 4.63 ERA, but a 3.35 expected ERA. This year, through 2 starts, he does have a 6.75 ERA, but a 3.5 expected ERA. So there's been a lot of bad luck, particularly with his strand rate. He's just had bad sequencing. He's had a lot of these situations where a guy or two get on base, and they've just been scoring more often than not, which shouldn't be the case. He's a 74% strand rate over the course of his career. It's hard for me to think all of a sudden he's just a guy that has a 66% strand rate. That aside, he's pitching in Colorado at Coors Field today. Nola individually is expected for very low ownership. He's expected to be 4.7% owned over on DK. As for the Rockies stack, it's projected to be fairly popular on DraftKings, fairly contrarian on FanDuel. But let's start by talking about Nola. Do you like him as a contrarian pitching option on the road in Colorado?
I have to. I'm intrigued by both sides of this one. I'm going to play Nola. I'm going to play Rockies. And I don't think it's that cost prohibitive or problematic to do it. He's 18.1% top 2 pitcher percentage, just 4.7% ownership. We've seen great pitchers go into Coors and get absolutely shelled. It's not a guy with crazy amount of velocity that can throw it by anybody. So, obviously some of his off-speed offerings, you're not going to be spinning them as much. Coors at altitude, that's kind of the way it is. But he is so good at limiting damage. You talk about the strand rate for him. I don't know if he got boned by Bohm. I'm not sure if that was anything that happened with him specifically. Seems like it's happening to a lot of Phillies pitchers. That wouldn't go against his earned run average, but I digress. 3.54 expected ERA is drastically different than the 6.75 ERA he's had in the early going. Plus a 5.2% walk rate. That was top 10% in the league in 2021. He doesn't really get himself into a lot of trouble historically. So I think it's a little blip on the radar here. So in the early going from his 2 starts there, only 76 pitches in both outings there. That's kind of concerning. He's 9,900, so you're not exactly getting a discount. But both of those things factor into his ownership, which is basically non-existent for a guy with as much arm talent as what Aaron Nola has. So pretty hard to look at him and not have some consideration for him as an SP1, SP2 option.
Not to mention the Rockies don't have a good offense. They're going to score runs from time to time because they play at Coors Field. But if you're just going by WRC plus, we're waiting for ballparks. It is not a good team. It is a team that right-hand pitchers, at least in previous years, have had a lot of success against. And it's probably even going to be worse this year because they don't have Trevor Story in the mix anymore. Obviously, Nolan Arenado hasn't been there for a couple of years now. So I do like Aaron Nola as a contrarian pitching option. The Rockies as a contrarian offense, I would like to get to them on FanDuel because they're not popular. DK, though, hard for me to have interest when they're projected for double-digit ownership. What are you going to be doing with Rockies stacks against Nola?
I'm going to stack them. I mean, it's as clear cut as that. I think you kind of you made the point, I think, for me on FanDuel, where they're the most positively leveraged team to get to. Over on DK, less so, but I still think that there's viability, that it's Coors Field, and I think there's individual hitters that we know are going to be popular. And that's one of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough. And we talked about the back end of the Phillies lineup. There's going to be lineups or players that we can isolate, whether it's Elias Diaz at the catcher position, if he's going to be in that lineup. Brendan Rodgers has been batting up in that order. Ryan McMahon has a lot of power. Somebody that I think is going to pan out for this Rockies team long-term. Chris Bryant obviously is going to be popular. So there's ways to get away from him. CJ Cron, who is starting to show, I bet him to lead the majors in home runs last year. That was a fail. And now he's right out of the gate, hit 5. And of course I didn't bet him this year. So thanks a lot, CJ Cron, former Twins great CJ Cron for 1 year. That was fun. But I think that you just avoid Connor Joe, you avoid Chris Bryant, you avoid CJ Cron in some of those lineups, and you're going to have pretty low ownership across the board for your stacks. So there's ways that I think we can put that lineup together where you're not going to have a ton of ownership, and you could probably find maybe not positive leverage, but pretty close to it.
Wonder something pretty crazy. Just going to the leaderboard right now. So CJ Cron compared to Vlad Guerrero Jr. CJ Cron, 193 WRC plus, Vlad Jr., 193 WRC plus. Home runs,
I know.
5 for CJ Cron, 5 for Vladimir Guerrero
I'm
Jr.
aware, Greg.
Runs, 7 for CJ Cron, 7 for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. RBIs, 10 for CJ Cron, 10 for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's just funny to me that they have the exact same amount of counting stats for fantasy
CJ
purposes.
Cron was my highest owned. He was the guy that I drafted up to get in every league last year, and he sucked. I bet him to lead the majors in home runs. He sucked. It was terrible. And now he's awesome. And of course, I'm just like, oh, well, maybe, the Detroit Tigers numbers, the Twins numbers. Oh, maybe it was just a blip on the radar. No, he's actually that good. And I just didn't buy into him this year. And I'm just very upset already. I know it's only a week and a half, 2 weeks into it, but he looks so good up at the plate. It's ridiculous.
He wasn't that bad last year, though.
It wasn't that good, Greg. Not when you're betting him to lead the majors in home runs.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's always a tough thing. But I mean, he hit 28 homers last year at a 127 WRC plus. Was he like where was he going in fantasy drafts last year? Like, I can't imagine he was a bust with those numbers.
It wasn't good. I think I'm trying to think. I mean, it depends on what your league is too. I mean, roto wise, it was not where I expected him to go. Yeah, he actually was going up. So early on in drafts last year, I was able to get a lot of shares of him pretty like 7th, 8th roundish. That did not happen as the season progressed. He moved up the board in year-long stuff, and it ended up not working out that well. But as you said, he didn't work out that well. At the very end of the year, he came alive. But for the first month or so, I mean, there were first 2 or 3 months, it was kind of an atrocity.
We do have Josh Gillum has said, imagine Vlad in Coors. How many home runs do we think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would play if he was a Colorado Rocky? How many home runs would he have?
I mean, it depends, because like Coors Field, it's the doubles and triples effect more so than just straight out homers. But I mean, this is Vlad we're talking about, where he makes just so much hard contact. It would definitely be a plus for him, even from the Rogers Center. I mean, would he average over a 10-year sample size? Would he average 55?
Could
55?
Could be. I'm sure there's a mathematical way to do it where there's probably a site somewhere where you could.
If you go to Baseball Savant, one of my favorite things just for fun on Baseball Savant is you go down and you see which pitchers would be giving up which home runs in that ballpark. There's expected home runs by park for each pitcher. So you can see what their hard hit data would be for home runs. So you can translate it for a pitcher who's in Coors Field and translate it to other ballparks. That's really fun. I don't know that it exists for hitters, but it would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, so the other thing too, just to Terry's point that he had fewer home runs, I know it's not necessarily the best ballpark just for home runs individually, but also keep in mind, this would be my other point, is that if he's playing in Coors Field, he's going to get more at bats also because of the amount of high scoring games there are. So that was something else that would factor into his counting stats. But yeah, it'd be interesting to just look at his numbers if you looked at his batted ball data and just airdropped.
There we go.
Different
so
stadiums.
Expected home run by park. Here it is. It is on the hitters. I only ever really look at it for pitchers. All right. So in 2021, he hit 48 home runs. How many do you think would have been home runs in Coors Field?
48.
29.
That seems incorrect.
I'm looking at the number right now. I mean, it definitely suppresses home runs a little bit more than you would expect, not just a humidor, but it's just a bigger ballpark to hit balls out of. But I'm looking at the numbers. 48 homers, 29 of them expected home runs by park.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a more scientific. It feels off to me, but I don't have a more scientific way to do it. What do I know? I'm sitting here. I'm just reading
the numbers on the page. Again, I'm talking through more at bats. I'm talking through basically for him. I can't imagine that he's like up there having to swing harder because he's in Coors or something. It's just, I think probably if there's a specific spot that he's trying to hit it in the Rogers Center, maybe you pick a different portion of Coors Field to try to hit it out of. I don't really know how to think about that.
Well, we'll never know because the Rockies will never have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Moving on with the rest of the slate. Also do us a favor, guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, help Eric afford more t-shirts. Oakland A's at home against the Baltimore Orioles. Now the Orioles, they're on the road, so this isn't going to matter, but the ballpark, the new dimensions, the Orioles have found a way to make themselves not only a shitty team, but also unwatchable now. Because at least before they would lose games and be like, hey, look, they lost 11-7, a bunch of home runs were hit. Well, now their home ballpark with the new dimensions looks like it's going to be playing much more favorable towards pitchers. But now they're going to be on the road in Oakland against a park that we know for sure is favorable towards pitchers. Frankie Montas on the mound with just a broken price tag over on DraftKings. How it came to be. that Frankie Montas is 7,300 is beyond me on DK. FanDuel, he is 9,900 and projected to be the most popular play on the slate. DK at 7,300, he's projected for nearly 60% ownership. How are you going to view Montas when he's this popular and this mispriced in a good matchup?
Yeah, you gotta have Frankie Montas in your portfolio. I do the best bets. I recorded that this morning, so I'm doing MLB best bets this entire season. Looking forward to that. My best bet on the board today is actually -195 Oakland Athletics. I feel pretty confident. Spencer Watkins, Frankie Montas, this is the tale of two pitchers that do completely different things. And, you talked about it, the dimensions in Camden, only 2 home runs, both by Cedric Mullins here for the Baltimore Orioles at home. As Jorge Polanco hits a home run. Yes, I'm watching the game on my iPad. Don't mind me. Let's go. But Baltimore Orioles, definitely an offense that you want to target against. And as bad as the Oakland Athletics offense is, it is just hard for me to look at these two pitchers and say that I don't want to be rostering a bunch of Frankie Montas. And Spencer Watkins might be the worst pitcher in all of baseball. At least that's what it seemed like based on his 2021 data. But starting with Montas, when you're just looking at him as a guy that is starting to miss more bets, 26.6% K percentage last season. That was the highest since his rookie season in 2015, 25.5% now through 2 starts. The pitch count is there, looks lovely. He has a 2.89 expected ERA compared to his 4.76 ERA. So he's been getting unlucky in that department. He's only given up 3 barrels in the early going. He limits hard contact. There aren't any real threats outside of Cedric Mullins in this lineup. In this ballpark specifically, he just looks so good. And Spencer Watkins on the other side, 8.25 expected ERA now through 1 start and a 6.94 expected ERA last season. That was bottom 1% of the entire league. He is as bad as it gets.
So he sucks. The Oakland A's offense also sucks though. And the Oakland A's offense is really popular. Project for 7% ownership on FanDuel, over 10% ownership on DraftKings. So this doesn't make me want to roster Spencer Watkins. Like you said, he's terrible. I totally back that up. I do not think this guy is good whatsoever, but I don't want to target this Oakland A's offense when they're going to be this popular. There's just never a situation where I think Oakland should be a popular offense, particularly when they're at home in that pitcher-friendly ballpark. Do you feel differently because Watkins is so bad? Because right now, I think this is a team I'm just not going to have in my player pool.
No, I'll probably have some one-offs, but I'm not going to be stacking them at these top stack numbers. So we're looking at 4.6% top stack potential on TK, yet only negative 5.4 leverage, the most negatively leveraged team I just refreshed. That is bonkers. I can't believe how popular Oakland is. I think there's individual bats that I'll want to get to. It's kind of the way that I've talked about teams like Oakland, teams like Pittsburgh with Brian Haynes, Brian Reynolds, guys that are actual major league hitters. I think Oakland has a couple guys, especially again, Spencer Watkins, that I might want to isolate just for power, but on the whole, just not a team to go crazy with whatsoever. I think Jed Lowry on the back end of that lineup, maybe is somebody who could fit into lineups to get a little bit different. Billy McKinney, probably my favorite bat, projected to be in that lineup altogether. Former Blue Jay, not great, but Billy McKinney, probably an okay one-off to get shares of. And Sean Murphy, always viability to a guy batting high in the order at the catcher spot. You're paying full freight at 4,800. Hopefully that keeps some of his ownership down, but he's at 12.8%. Even that seems a little extreme. Guys like Tony Kemp, Elvis Andrus, I bashed, and then he ended up bashing the baseball in Tampa Bay the other day. I'm still just not going to be rostering him long-term.
Yeah, we do have 3-run shots. Don't the A's lead the MLB in runs? Yes, but that doesn't mean they're the best offense in baseball. Like this is
also,
still...
they got a bullpen game in Tampa Bay where they punted the game. Like that 13 runs, that's such an outlier. It's one game. You can't 13 runs from one game. That could be a 3-game sample size against, a team playing the Dodgers with Buehler, Kershaw. I mean, come on, we got to take longer than 1 week to say stuff like that.
Yeah. And I'm not looking at any of the results from this part of the season. The only thing I'm really looking at least from the first couple of weeks, is are there any pitchers that have seen like drastic velocity change? Like Zach Wheeler's one to me where there's a lot of red flags. I know he's not pitching today, but I'm just using him as an instance. End of last year, Zach Wheeler, who kind of like what the 76ers did with Joel Embiid down the stretch of the season, where they tried to get him the MVP award. And that's what the Phillies did, also Philadelphia team, did with Zach Wheeler, where they were having him throw massive amounts of innings and pitches down the stretch of the season. And he said to the media after the year that my arm was really sore, and I don't think I would have been able to pitch to the playoffs had we made it. And then this year also, he got scratched from a spring training start with arm soreness. Then you look at the start of this year. Last year, Zach Wheeler had a 97 average mile per hour fastball velocity. He's at 94 this year. That stuff to me is all concerning and not all that surprising that he struggled to open up this season so far. Those are the kind of numbers that I'm looking at to start the year. Velocity changes in pitchers, just an offense where it's like, oh, they've scored a bunch of runs through a week or so. It's hard. There's a lot of noise there. A lot of it's going to be predicated on where did teams play? Who did they play against? Was Brett Phillips pitching for the other team? Like, these are things that are going to influence how many runs a team scored. So if you're looking at the A's going forward, I think this is going to be a bad offense, and I don't really see another way to look at them. If they end up being a good offense, so be it. I'll be wrong, but ultimately, I think they're overowned today. I don't think they're going to have a good offense. Did you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that was beautiful.
All right, couple games left to talk about. Next one, West Coast games now. San Diego Padres at home against the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds have one of the lowest implied team totals on the slate, 3.5 runs. The reason being Sean Manaea is on the opposite side of the hill. High strikeout rate last year. Also fairly decent 4.15 expected ERA. Here is a key, though, when it comes to Sean Manaea and the San Diego Padres. There has been no pitch count restrictions on any of these Padres guys. We saw Manaea right away out of the gate, over 90 pitches. He's just been full go to open the air. So I think this is a good spot to get to Sean Manaea. The field's also getting there, but it's all reasonable to me. $9,100 price tag on DK is projected for 27% ownership. Over on FanDuel at 9,700, maybe a little too popular, 17% ownership on a single pitcher site. But either way, I think Manaea is one of the higher priority pitcher plays tonight. Do you agree with that?
Yep, absolutely. He's the over 6.5 strikeouts. Seems like a hefty number, but plus money the number of books here as well. You talk about no pitch count restrictions. That's check. K rate back to where we saw last year, where he's seen some drastic improvements in that regard. 25.7%, by far the highest of his career last season. 28.9% in the early going. So check in that department. You're getting a Cincinnati offense that strikes out third most in baseball through the first couple of weeks. So check. Everything makes sense to get to some Sean Manaea here in this spot. It's always a question of, how popular is he going to be? Well, because Frankie Montas exists, I think it's pretty easy to get to any other pitcher on the board and know that you're not going to be dealing with any kind of an ownership situation. So Clayton Kershaw, Sean Manaea, Aaron Nola, all of these guys on the top end of the board are all going to be very, very under-owned compared to where they would be on any slate where Frankie Montas doesn't exist. So Sean Manaea, a definite priority for me today.
Yeah, and also something else about the other side of this game, the Reds, 2% chance to be the top scoring stack on the slate. This is not a team I'm going to want to get to, and it's not even like there's a lot of positive leverage there or anything. This is just a low-owned team, low-owned stack probability, not a team that I want to get to. Are you on the same page there?
Yes, I am on the same page. I was trying to figure out what was going on in chat here, because are we discussing the shift right now? We're having a shift conversation before 9 a.m. in the West Coast.
Just
Greg, do you have a shift? Do you have a shift take?
Yeah, play defense however the hell you want. Like, why?
That is exactly the right take. That's the only take there is. Period.
Yeah, it's like the old school. Remember, like basketball, they didn't let you play zone defense in like the 80s and 90s. Just the dumbest thing ever. Just scheme. You play defense however you want, and it's the onus is on the offense to adjust. If you can't, that's your fault. If you're Joey Gallo and your thing is like, well, I can't hit the ball the other way. I only hit the ball to this part of the field. So what? You figure out how to hit the ball the other way. You
bunt down the left base. You bunt it to third, and you take your free base, and you shut up.
There's no way that it's not an unfair advantage. The defense is like, hey, this is where you hit the ball. We're just going to stand on this side of the field. It would be like if there's a player who's really left-hand dominant in the NBA, and you just always guarded him to try to force him to go to the right. And then you're just like, oh, well, you can't do that anymore because he can only dribble with his left hand. So you have to be able to play him straight up so he can go either way. No, you play to people's strengths and weaknesses. Yep. And then the offense players have to adjust. I don't think it's that complicated.
It's like in the NFL. If you have a wide receiver, it's like, oh, well, Tyreek Hill was just too fast. We couldn't catch him. Okay, well then scheme something up. And then it's like, oh, well, we double team Tyreek Hill and we couldn't get the ball to Travis Kelce. Seems like a you problem is what it comes down to. So play defense however you want in basketball, in football, especially in a sport like baseball, where there's going to be a hole somewhere on the field when you put the shift into play. You have an opportunity, figure it out. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and then also, because Jordan Burkhardt said this in chat, I'm a little confused how this gets regulated. Is it just going to be a thing where it's like everybody gets a circle and this is where you stand on the field? This is just your spot on the field? Is it going to be a thing you can only have this many people on this side of second base? Yeah. Outfielders have to say, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't read the rules to see how it gets regulated. Have you?
No, but I imagine like in my brain, it goes to like American Gladiators where there's that little circle and you have to be like in the circle. And then the person with the gun is sitting up on top of the platform shooting, tennis balls at you. And you start on the circle and you go to like each little stage portion and you move your way up. That's how I imagine it.
Yeah, I'll look at it after this to try to get an idea for it. But either way, we've got a couple more spots left here to talk about. First, Nick Lodolo, the rookie pitcher, is going to be on the mound for the Cincinnati Reds, one of the higher regarding pitching prospects in all of baseball. So far this year, we've only seen one outing for him. It didn't go all that well. The positive side, he did throw very hard, 94.3 average fastball velocity. Matchup against the Padres is less than ideal. As for the ownership right now, we have on Lodolo, FanDuel at 6K. I don't really think there's a need to consider him on a single pitcher site, but on DK, where he is 6,100, does that make him at all an intriguing SP2 option?
Yeah, he's going to be on the cheap end. Is there anybody else under 7,300 underneath Montas that you would want to roster more than him?
No, because the other options,
he's the guy.
The other options are Kyle Hendricks. Nope. Madison Bumgarner. Nope. Zach Thompson. Nope. Spencer Watkins. That is another nope. And then Chad Kuhl, who no. So yeah, if I had to roster any pitcher who's cheaper than Montas, the answer would be Lodolo. He's only projected for 2% ownership on DraftKings. So if we get to a spot where maybe you're stacking Coors Field and you really need the salary savings, I don't mind getting to him. And I assume I'm going to be overweight to the field at pretty low ownership in the lineups I built this morning.
Yeah, I have 20% in just a 150 lineup where I just plugged them in. I just took the projections we had on the site, kind of tweaked a couple of things just in terms of pitch count. And I'm getting to a lot of Nick Lodolo. I mean, he's a guy that I don't really know what to expect long-term out of him, but as you said, one of the best prospects in baseball. He was the number 7 pick in 2019, really young lefty out of TCU that it's shown some stuff in the minors, but I really think it's a spot to be overinvested in this. It's one start. I don't think there's a whole lot of to mine out of one start here. You want to talk sample size. That's one start. He has a crazy amount of pace on it. You were talking about a little bit there. Exit velocity. He limited hard contact there too in that start. Only a 5 expected ERA. Got a little bit unlucky there. He was walking guys. That's not ideal. Diamondbacks Nationals got postponed. So that was good to get out of the way right away. Thank goodness. So Nick Lodolo, he's a guy that I just think that you want to get to shares of because of the utility he has to get you bats.
Can I tell you my favorite thing that may have just ever happened in chat right now? Somebody has mistaken our producer, Mike Lawrence, for Alex Baker because his name is Awesemo. No, Alex Baker and Mike Lawrence Awesemo are not the same person.
I don't know. They both. I mean, they both dabble in the DFS streets, right? Awesemo.
No, but one of them's a Sixers fan and one of them's a Detroit Lions fan. Yeah. So that's why they're not the same. Everything else.
Is Mike a Sixers fan? I've never noticed.
Let's see. What hat is he wearing today?
Cheer for? All I know is that he has a Buffalo Bills chair, so I don't know what to believe anymore.
He's wearing a hat that says Philadelphia. What about your sweatshirt, Mike? Does that say Philadelphia anything?
Oh no, failure.
Oh my God.
You're not a real fan.
Yeah, he's
You're
probably not even a fan. All right, maybe they are the same person now.
Still cheering. He's secretly hoping Ben Simmons succeeds. He's that big of a fan of Philadelphia.
No way. Although who knows? He's not wearing the shirt. Maybe he's had a change of allegiances. Let's move on to the final game on the slate. Clayton Kershaw coming off 7 perfect innings.
Hold up. Roster Manny Machado. Okay, continue on.
Okay. Final spot here to talk about Clayton Kershaw coming off 7 perfect innings. Didn't get to finish the game. Caused a lot of debate online. Clayton Kershaw seemed fine with it. He said himself, remember also he's coming off an elbow injury in the postseason last year. Started this season, he said he wasn't really in the best shape coming into the year, and he was looking to, kind of work himself, slowly build himself up. But then all of a sudden he's pitching so well in the first start that they're just beginning to think, should they leave him in? Should they take him out? 7 perfect innings. Clayton Kershaw ultimately ends up coming out. He's got a difficult matchup against the Braves today, but even in limited innings, he was really good last year. While he's not the same Cy Young pitcher he was in the past, a healthy Kershaw is still a force to be reckoned with. What are you going to be doing with him today up against this Braves offense?
I think you have to still have interest. I mean, Clayton Kershaw healthy is just terrifying. This guy, going back to the early, like the mid 2000s, basically 2015, 2016, when I really got into baseball, I was going to a lot of Dodger games, and I always made a point to go to Clayton Kershaw games because it was just the electricity in the ballpark. It felt different. It was just an amazing experience to have. Going back to those days, 2.11, 2.06, 2.92 expected ERAs. We're talking just ludicrous type numbers. He's never walked guys. So in terms of stacks going up against him, it is so hard to leverage with the team on the other side because he rarely gets himself into trouble in that regard. Last season as well, a 373 expected slugging, 222 expected batting average in a limited sample for a career, 213 expected batting average going up against him. He's just ludicrous good when healthy. Looks healthy to me. 80 pitches against the Twins. Looked really, really nice. I think it's the right decision with back problems that he's fought throughout his entire career. Then the elbow issue last year. You got to take care of your guy. Your goal is to win a World Series. You don't pay $400 million to see one perfect game. If people want to, come at me about that, I really don't care. It's like you went and got Freddie Freeman. You have Trey Turner. You have Mookie Betts. You have the best team in baseball. One game ain't going to do it for you. So if you're going to go out and win a World Series, you need Clayton Kershaw pitching like this. And I see it continuing if they're just going to be very smart about his pitch count going forward.
Yeah, and then as good as he looked on opening day, I'm not going to want to stack the Braves against him either. 3.7 implied run total. Clayton Kershaw still one of the better pitchers in baseball history. And even on the decline, he's one of the better pitchers in all of baseball. So Braves not a team I'm looking to get to. How about for you? Any reason to get to them for leverage, assuming Kershaw ends up being pretty popular?
No, zero. Just because of how good Kershaw is. I talked about it too. He doesn't have a glaring thing that it's like, oh, I could see this working out for a full stack. He doesn't walk guys. Sure, he could get really, really unlucky and run into some issues there, but on the whole, he doesn't give up hard contact here. I mean, last season he gave up a little bit, just in terms of max exit velocity, but it's not really any kind of a concern for me. Only 4.5 barrels per plate appearance. I mean, we're looking at a spot where Clayton Kershaw is good across the board at everything. He's now striking guys up. 29.5% was his highest mark in terms of strikeouts since 2017. So if this is the early going, this is healthy Kershaw. We've seen some drastic improvements to a lot of his pitch arsenal as he's gotten older here. Just his ability to locate, and he's seen more swings and misses as a result. I expect him, if he stays healthy, to be a Cy Young candidate.
And then on the other side of the game, Yuscar, is a young pitcher that I do like a little bit. Really high strikeout rate, 26.9% last year. So there's generally DFS upside in him. I'm not going there against the Dodgers. This offense is ridiculous, arguably the best offense in all of MLB history when everybody's out on the field. So I am not going to want to roster pitchers against them, particularly when they're on the road. So no for me. As for the Dodgers offense, about appropriately owned. We're looking at around 7% top stack odds, 7% ownership. So I'm going to look to get to the Dodgers somewhere even with the field. The matchup against Ynoa, not the best in the world, but this offense could get to any pitcher at any point in time. No for me. I'll be about even with the field on the Dodgers. What are you going to do with this situation?
I'm going to bet them. I already did yesterday, which was great. As I was coming across the Arizona border over here, minus 105. You're looking at the Dodgers. This is a juggernaut. This entire team is ridiculous.
Wait, where'd you get the minus 105?
Minus 1.5. It's minus 1.5 run line. Sorry. It's minus 1.5 run line, minus 105. They're 7-2 this season. They've covered the minus 1.5 run line 7 times. So I'm just saying they're going to win lots of games by lots of runs because this lineup 1 through 9 is absurd. Cody Bellinger, 1 year, 17 million, is batting like 8th in this lineup. It is not even fair. And Austin Barnes having some pop in the early going of this season, just a make-believe team. But yes, they've literally won every single game that they won season within 2 runs. So this minus 1.5 run line, it's a great bet until you start seeing some inflated numbers. As much as we both, I do think Ynoa has some decent stuff in terms of like just his arsenal going back to last year. 26.9% K percentage. That was a drastic improvement from the early going of his career in 2019, 2020. So there's some strikeout potential there. Not today for me.
All right, that wraps up the slate. Don't forget, we did have that game at the top. That ended up getting postponed. Diamondbacks Nationals will not play today. That takes the weather spot out of consideration. Would have been cool if we got an hour before, because that would have chopped some time off the show. But whatever, is what it is. We got the news. It's pertinent now. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, guys. Don't forget, check out the NBA Live Before Lock, NBA Deeper Dive, and MLB Live Before Lock later in the day. Good luck.